Hi there. Today we're going to see how to hook up AWS Cognito with Microsoft Entra ID. I'll walk you through the whole thing from simple local authentication to full enterprise setup. And yes, we'll probably hit some bumps along the way and we'll need to fix it. Now you might ask, why would I want to integrate AWS Cognito with Microsoft Entra ID? Doesn't AWS Cognito already handle user authentication and authorization? Integrating AWS Cognito with Microsoft Entra ID, or formerly known as Azure AD, makes a lot of sense for many organizations. And I explain why. Let's say your company already uses Microsoft's ecosystem for employee accounts and access management, Active Directory sync to Entra ID, or full cloud identity management with Entra ID. Meanwhile, you're building or running applications on AWS that need secure authentication. These apps have native integration with Cognito, but instead of creating and managing a completely separate set of user accounts and Cognito, you connect these two systems to have, well, firstly, a single sign-on experience. Your employees can use their existing Entra work credentials to access your AWS applications. No new passwords to remember, no separate login screens. They just use what they already know. Second, it massively simplifies user management. When someone joins or leaves your organization, you only need to update their access in one place. Their access to AWS applications automatically follows those changes. No need to add or remove accounts in multiple systems. Lastly, it enforces consistent security policies. If you require multi-factor authentication or have specific password requirements in Entra ID, those same policies will apply when accessing your AWS applications. Now, the glue that makes this integration work is something called SAML, Security Assertion Markup Language. SAML is an open standard that allows identity providers like Entra ID to securely pass authentication and authorization data to service providers like AWS Cognito. Here's how SAML works in simple terms. When you try to access an AWS app, it redirects you to Entra ID for authentication. You sign into Entra ID with your company credentials. Entra ID then creates a SAML reply, and within that reply, there's an assertion. It is basically a digitally signed document that says, yes, this person is who they claim to be. It's pretty much like a driver's license or a passport. Next is this SAML assertion is sent back to AWS Cognito, which then validates it and grants you access. And the whole exchange happens securely with crypto signatures, ensuring the messages can't be tampered with. The beauty of SAML is that your password never touches AWS. Entra ID handles the authentication and just passes a verified token to AWS. For IT teams, this integration reduces maintenance. We don't need to log in to two separate identity systems, and we don't need to keep them in sync. Now back to what we're doing today. Here's what I'm going to show you. First, how our app works with just regular Cognito login. Then we'll plug in Entra ID and see all that SAML stuff in action. We'd probably run into some issues and fix them. And I'll show you some tricks to check what's happening behind the scenes. So here's our demo app. It's a simple marketplace website where you can browse products without authenticating and then authenticate if I need to do some admin work. So this application is currently hooked up to Cognito for authentication, and I want to try logging in with my local Cognito test user account. When I hit the protected resource to access the administrative functions, I don't have the permissions. Now, why is that? If I look at the Cognito console, and I know that this is the user pool in Cognito that my application is hooked up to, I get to see that this test user account is not a member of this group. I also know that my application is expecting a group called Marketplace Admins. So this line 21 in my Lambda application code defines the group that it is expecting that it will give admin permissions. So it is an easy fix where I will just add my user to this group. When I try to log out and log back in as the test user account, access the protected resources, I now have admin access. So that's good. Now let's plug in Entra ID as our company login system. First, I need to set up an app on the Entra portal. So I'll create an application and create my own application. I'll give it a name, which I'll call Marketplace Demo Entra App. Hit create. Then I'll go to single sign-on, select SAML, click on edit in the basic SAML configuration. I'll add an identifier. And this unique ID is what represents the Cognito application in my Microsoft Entra. Amazon provides an online document, which I'll provide a link to in the description below. It gives us a quick reference on where we can find the identifier and reply URL. So it gives us this quick reference for IDP configuration. IDP stands for Identity Provider. And we can get this SP Identity ID. SP is Service Provider, which in our case, because we're integrating with Microsoft Entra, Cognito is the one providing the service. Entra is the identity provider. So this US East 1 example, that is the user pool ID that we can get from the Cognito console. In my back to the overview here, see this user pool ID? I just copy that and paste it over to construct my entity ID, which I will paste onto here to Entra. And then the reply URL, if we refer back to the document, it's saying your user pool domain is what you need to just plug into this template for ACS URL. ACS is short for Assertion Consumer Service. This is the service that Cognito has provided that will consume that SAML assertion, which we'll get into in a while. Where do we get this user pool domain? We go back to Amazon Cognito console, and down here in branding, domain, I'll just copy this domain ID, which is Marketplace Entra Demo, which I'll plug into the template and paste it onto Entra. So those are the only two details that I need from Amazon Cognito. Hit save, close that, and I just need to update this with my unique user identifier. It's good practice to use, instead of user principal name, it's better to change this to user object ID, because user object ID stays the same regardless of when that user changes. And remember the group that our app is expecting? I'll add that as a group claim here. And if I select all groups, leave the default of source attribute as group ID, save that, and that should be all I need from the single sign-on blade. I'll also add a user here. So I'll also go to the properties, and the default here is, I'll just like to point this configuration out to you, the assignment required, which means you need to explicitly add a user to the users and groups blade of this enterprise application for this app to be accessed by your users. So by default, that's left on, and we'd like to leave it like that. I'd like to add Alex as my test user. So that ends our configuration on the Entra side of things. Now over to Cognito, I will need to update or create an identity provider or a representation of my Entra ID on Amazon Cognito. It's over down here in the social and external providers of the user pool. I want to add an identity provider. Remember, I said identity provider will be my Entra ID. And we select SAML. I will name it Entra ID and leave the defaults as is. I'm going to enter metadata document endpoint URL. So you've noticed it gives me a couple of options. One is to upload the metadata document and also be able to enter just the URL. If we go back to enterprise application single sign-on and scroll down here to SAML certificates, you can see I've got an option to download the federation metadata XML, or I can just copy this app federation metadata URL and give this to Cognito. So select this and paste this federation metadata document URL. Now, you might wonder, what is this URL? What is this federation metadata? We can actually have a look at this by browsing to it. And all it is a convenience document so that Cognito will know when it creates that SAML trust, all the details it needs to be able to create that federation and process all the SAML authentications or sign-ins. So there's, as you can see, it's a XML document that contains a lot of details. Why don't I just use the upload download metadata document? Apart from being cumbersome when I'm downloading and uploading the metadata document, it also becomes a problem when it's time to renew the certificate of this SAML certificate. If we go back to Entra, you can see that I've created the SAML configuration today, 2025, and the expiration is not until 3 years in 2028. Come 2028, I will need to manually download this again when I renew the certificate on Entra, and then do the same thing of uploading this document here. So why would I give myself a headache in the future when I can just point it to the URL so that Cognito will just pick up the new certificates when the certificates get renewed. Next, I'll be mapping the attributes that Entra sends, and Cognito must be made aware of this. So if I go to my enterprise application, go up to attributes and claims, and click on edit, these values here under claim names are what I need to provide over to Cognito. I will just copy them and paste them over to Cognito. We'll then add identity provider. This is the attribute mapping. I have custom groups here that is mapped to the Microsoft SAML attribute group for groups, and the rest are the standard email address, surname, given name, and name attributes that now my Cognito application is aware of when Entra sends the SAML claim over. After configuring the identity provider on Cognito, I'll now need to instruct the app client to not use Cognito, but instead redirect and send it to Entra ID as my identity provider. So this is all I need to do. Untick Cognito and tick Entra, hit save. Then I can now test. And I'm using an incognito browser session so that it doesn't have any cached credentials. So you can see I'm now presented with Entra ID for authentication. Let me just enter Alex's credentials. The application is recognizing me as Alex. And if I browse through the products, it still lets me, but I am now expecting to be denied access to do admin work. For troubleshooting, I highly recommend this Chrome extension that's also available on Microsoft Edge. It's called SAML Tracer. So I've already pre-installed it, and it will let us see the actual SAML reply and request that my browser sends to Entra, and eventually it sends to Cognito. To fire up that extension, I'm now going to log in, I'm now going to try login. And now you can see I'm presented with Entra, asked to sign in to my Entra ID as the provider, and I've been redirected now to Entra, sign in as Alex, and now we've got our SAML capture. I'll just expand that. You see the colors here, they're conveniently colored in yellow, and these are the communication that we're interested in looking. We can see that the first call here was made to my application. It's this URL here, which I got a 302 redirect response telling me go to this Cognito endpoint to log in. In the next capture, we can see that we've made a call to Cognito from that redirect. If I click on this next one with SAML, my browser now knows about my Entra endpoint, obviously named login.microsoft online. And this next set of strings here is actually my Entra tenant ID. You can see there's a SAML request portion here as well, which is in base64 encrypted format, but SAML Tracer conveniently decodes that for us and presents it in a more user-friendly look. If you remember, these are the endpoints that we've configured on the SAML enterprise application on Entra. So it then sends, so this is when it sends its SAML authentication request. The succeeding packets now are all communications with Microsoft Entra as part of logging in. And finally, we get to this post request where Entra has told my browser to go back to Cognito with a SAML response. If we look at the HTTP portion, it again says my origin is Entra, and it's telling me go to this Cognito endpoint. And again, it contains a lot of characters that we cannot easily decipher. But SAML Tracer conveniently decodes this for us, and we can see the response here being that our browser now knows about, and it's sending to Cognito. We're interested in this attributes portion because I'm expecting my user to have admin access, and I'm trying to figure out how we can get that admin access. So notice this line here for the attribute groups. There's a bunch of alphanumeric characters here, which actually are the group object IDs that my Entra enterprise application is sending over, because that's actually what I told it to do. So how to fix it is I could fix it by updating my Lambda code so that my Lambda code will just accept the object ID of the group that I want to have marketplace admins, or I can just update the claim in the enterprise application. In this instance, I'll do the second option of updating enterprise app. Back here on Entra, I'll select my enterprise app, single sign-on, and edit the attributes and claims. Select groups, and instead of sending all groups, I just want to send it this last option here, groups assigned to the application, and the group attribute would be cloud-only group display names. Next, I'll change this to use, instead of Alex, I'll remove him here, and add my marketplace admins group and assign this group instead access to this enterprise application. If I look at my members, I can see that Alex is a member of this group. I'll now go back to testing with Alex, get him to log out. I'll just clear this SAML trace, log back in. Let's have a quick look at the SAML trace. And this is the packet capture that we're interested in. The SAML here, scroll down to attributes. And for the attribute for groups, I can now see that it's actually marketplace admins that it's sending over. So if I go back to the marketplace demo app and click on access admin, it's now giving me access to the protected resources. The other place that I can check for that traffic going to the application is go to CloudWatch and select the log group for my Lambda application. I know that this is the Lambda function that I am looking at, and filter it to the last 30 minutes, run that query, and I can confirm here that the last time when I was having an issue before I updated Entra, that the custom groups that's being sent over by Cognito are those object IDs of Entra groups. After hitting refresh, I can see that the latest traffic has been logged, and now my application is recognizing that my user has admin access because it's in the marketplace admins group. We're seeing all of this because I've configured my application to do some helpful logging that it'll send to CloudWatch. But what if your app doesn't have that? You can use still CloudWatch by inspecting traffic like this is probably what I'm after, where you can look at the message field and the value there. See this authorization bearer? If I copy this whole thing, I think it's easier here. It's broken down by headers authorization. If I select this whole bit here after bearer and open up what they call a JWT decoder. So I like using the JOT MS, paste it here, and you can see the decoded claims here. You also can see in a more friendly user view in the claims tab, you see a lot of information. And this is the group that we are expecting to see. Custom groups is marketplace admins. Let's just compare that with the other capture that wasn't working. And it was this one here in number 12. If we go to headers authorization, copy this bearer token and paste the JUT token here, we'll see that the claims here is for Cognito groups, or correction, for custom groups, is this array of the alphanumeric characters. It's a list of different group IDs that Entra was sending over as part of the SAML response. Just quickly wanted to explain what JWT is, or JUT, as some people call it. It is JSON Web Token. JWT is an open source, it's an open standard for securely transmitting information between parties as a compact, self-contained token formatted as a JSON. It's widely used for authentication and authorization in web applications because the token itself contains user information and permissions that can be verified without needing to check a database. As we have seen here, it transmitted all this basic information about our user Alex. So that's it. Today, we got AWS Cognito talking to Microsoft Entra. We fixed a real problem with group-based access. We've used some handy tools to see what's happening behind the scenes. And you can use this same approach for pretty much any app. The concepts are the same: federation, attribute mapping, and checking groups for permissions. Thanks for watching. Drop any questions in the comments and I'll help you out.